大家好，欢迎收看伊达看世界，一起看世界，我是 Lano。串联全球的原住民族媒体呢，一直是我们期许的目标，希望持续从各国原住民族的媒体经验相互学习，看见不同观点。而在2022年12月，身为世界原住民族广播电视联盟 WIBN 的创始会员，澳洲原住民族电视台 NITV 庆祝免费无线频道10周年。而这一路走来相当不容易。而 NITV 是在2007年就创立了，并且在2012年正式成为澳洲公广机构 SBS 旗下的媒体。从这一刻开始，他们直播的内容不再仅限于原住民族人，而是触及全澳洲的民众。为了见证这历史性的里程碑，由5个国家的原住民族电视台组成的世界原住民族广电联盟，包括纽西兰的 Whakata Maoli、加拿大的 APTN 以及挪威萨米电视台，还有澳洲 NITV 以及我们台湾原民台的代表，都齐聚在澳洲的中心，也是原住民族的圣地乌鲁鲁，献上最大的祝福。而这次的聚会呢，也再度确认了联盟的共识，并拟定未来的策略走向。而今天我们非常荣幸呢，邀请到特别来宾 Tanya Orman， 她是 NITV 相当重要的领导者，也是目前呢 SBS 原住民族节目部的经理，拥有超过20年的媒体经验。他要来跟我们分享 NITV 这10年来的历程，也顺便聊聊今年的澳洲国庆日，原住民族人的诉求到底是什么？而在这当中，原住民族媒体扮演的角色和定位又在哪里？So hi, Tanya. It's so honored to have you here with us today. So first, could you please say hi to our audience and briefly introduce yourself?
Ora wanmada nayukadil Tanya Orman nayu junjun kokayamajan verigava nayu. I am the Director of Indigenous Content for Special Broadcast Service in Australia, which also includes my remit as the lead for National Indigenous Television, which is a special network within the greater SBS network that we broadcast First Nations content to all of Australians.
So Tanya, you have joined NITV since the very beginning, and you led NITV since it joined SBS in 2012. And you became SBS first Director of Indigenous Content in 2020. So as the important leader, could you briefly introduce NITV to our audience in Taiwan?
National Indigenous Television is a channel made by, for, and about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Through us, it's a channel for all Australians. NITV has been decades in the making. We have just celebrated 10 years of being available to every Australian, but our journey started long before that. We originally switched on as a narrowcaster in 2007, beaming out to bush communities in Australia. We didn't have access into Australian homes. It was a challenge to get the network up and running. We, as First Nations people, had been fighting for a place in Australia's media landscape for many decades. And there was only, we had ABC, SBS had existed, they're public broadcasters, but there was also an incredible ecosystem of remote Indigenous media and Indigenous community radio stations around the country, but we had no national remit or no national platform where we could deliver to all Australians, but particularly to our own communities where they could see themselves in Australian media. So in 2007, we had some funding that could keep us going for a few years, and that got us started, where we started to commission, we started a news and current affairs programming, we started acquiring content from around Australia. There was very few, so we also started creating our own content. We also created, acquired content from over with our brothers and sisters globally as part of the World Indigenous Television Network, including Taiwan. So that helped build NITV. And in 2012, we were able to move and have NITV a part of SBS. And we launched freely to every Australian on the 12th of the 12th in 2012. And that set us up on a new trajectory, stabilising an Indigenous platform for all Australians, but importantly, for the 300 odd different nations of First Nations peoples that we have in Australia. We've got distinct Aboriginal group and Torres Strait Islanders, but within that, we have about 300 different nations and clans that are First Nations who've been a part of this continent for more than 65,000 years.
So since 2012, NITV has officially become a media channel under SBS Network. So could you tell us more about the positioning of NITV under the SBS network?
And we, so technically, legally, we became a division of SBS. However, with our First Nations communities and advisory groups within the move of NITV into the network, we ensured that we adjusted the editorial guidelines and the code. So we have a really distinct positioning within the network to deliver this unique proposition, because everything at NITV is First Nations created. So what you see on screen is as important what's behind the scenes. So we're about growing the sector as well. So, and we work with the production sector. So that was a different modelling to what SBS had done in the past. So we moved the whole team. There's about 60 people that make up the channel, and then they work with production companies all over Australia. But we're a distinct network within the network. Technically, it is a division of SBS. So we're a part of our board, and our governance is with the SBS board, which includes First Nation membership. And there's also a community advisory that includes First Nation membership. However, in all intents and purposes, we are administered under the SBS Act now. And so we have a distinct place within the positioning. However, we are technically part of the SBS. So it's not a collaboration in any sense of the words. We are a part of SBS, but we deliver a distinct service for First Nations people through NITV. And we also deliver Indigenous content across the multi-platform universe of SBS. So we deliver Indigenous content onto the main channel, onto the food channel. We also, as part of SBS, which is the multicultural channel for Australia, we deliver our Indigenous content out into 60 odd different world languages, from Arabic, Mandarin, Cantonese. So new Australians or visitors who are coming into Australia can also get Indigenous news and current affairs or programming in our perspectives in the languages that they know and they trust. So we're in a really unique position as part of the network.
Among the mainstream media, how does NITV use the media power to promote and preserve Indigenous languages? And what is the Indigenous language percentage of the channel?
We're on a, with the impacts of colonisation onto Australia, we have some First Nation groups, where English is their sixth language and they speak different First Nation languages, but we also have new languages or, language revitalisation happening. So we're also reflecting that within the channel. So when asked what's the percentage, it's more the fact that when you watch NITV on any given day, you will hear First Nation languages. So we have an always on strategy, whether it's it's more bilingual or it's incorporated or you see it. There are probably less programs that we will have that are completely in language, but we do have, say, I know about 20% of our content are in different languages. The challenge is, of course, because we are, about 300 different nations. So how we also make that work and have the resources to subtitle and have those. So We do deliver our children's program. For instance, we've got a beautiful show called Little Jane Because that's now in its 4th season, and that's also delivered in 25 different First Nations languages, and that's available on our on-demand service called SBS On Demand. So the percentage is a good question and one where I can have a look at. However, I guess for the aim is to keep on growing, keep on improving, and in reflection of the decade of the world's Indigenous languages, it's really important for us to reflect the movement that's happening, considering schools, hospitals, institutions in Australia shut out all our languages. Once upon a time, you would be locked up if you were speaking First Nations language. So Australia is transitioning. So we're wanting to reflect that and ensure that our network is a safe space, a fun space, and not just First Nation communities are connecting and seeing themselves represented and hearing their languages, but also more and more Australians are hearing and connecting to these languages too.
Last December, NITV celebrates 10 years free-to-air anniversary at the heart of the Australia, Uluru. And as the member of WIBAN, we are also very honored to be invited to there and celebrate together. So Tanya, could you share with us about the celebration at that time?
Yeah, NITV was absolutely thrilled to be invited back to Central of Australia, out to Uluru, and the community that's near it, Mutitjulu, to celebrate the decade on since we became available to every Australian. So the reason we launched originally at Uluru 10 years ago and became available to every Australian there is for, I guess, 2 key reasons. Our media industry really spawned and through Central Australia media practitioners. So we wanted to pay homage to the many decades that existed before NITV existed and those shoulders who we stood on to get there. So the media sector, the remote media sector particularly, and those that fought hard for languages to be heard when we were, not seen or visible. And if we were seen or visible in Australian TV, most likely we were portrayed in a very negative sense. So that started really in Central Australia. So, and then Uluru is spiritually connected for First Nations people. We have many song lines that have crosses into Uluru, creation stories that go into that for all the different nations around Australia. And then also Australians in general have a connection to this place because it is, for those who have gone there can understand it is, there is an incredible pull. It's a very ancient land. It's a very special place. So we launched as the media, we're the world's oldest continuous storytellers. Our stories still exist strongly today. And we wanted to go to the Central Australia, into Uluru again, and to be invited and work with the community to celebrate this important moment was incredible. So we launched initially 10 years ago, being available to every Australian, and then really the only place that we could celebrate this 10-year milestone had to be Uluru. The actual event, we invited our industry to come. We wanted everyone who's been a part of NITV's story, NITV's success, to converge onto Uluru. So we had our state agencies, our screen practitioners, we had the best of Australian and who happen to be First Nations performers, artists, and we wanted to really deliver something special for all our Australian audiences, and we were really proud that our global partners, our World Indigenous partners, also took the content so that they could sort of reverberate, because a part of our story has been connecting with other World Indigenous brothers and sisters and sharing our stories and learning from each other as well.
As you mentioned, everything started from Uluru, and this place is also a sacred place for the Indigenous peoples in Australia. And you also mentioned about the song lines. So could you share with us what is the concept of the song lines and why it is so important for Indigenous peoples?
Songlines are, stories that you get passed on to help you, navigate through the land, to know where to go or what story. So it's how you learnt law and customs. So you get passed on your story, and when you have songlines that connect, it's about, okay, how the land was made and where there's men's business, women's business, you can't go there. So you get past these stories, and the song tells you where you can go. The song looks after you. The song is something you pass on. It's a science. So different clans have different songs, where they belong. So it's the lore, I guess. It's a way that you sort of know your story and your place. So I don't know if you remember when I played I'm learning my song. So that song tells about um, where is my traditional country, where I can go, where I don't go, which might be dangerous. So that song has been passed on from clan to from my families over the generations, and you get taught it when you're young. Um, to teach you that's your area, that's where you can go. Or you may get songs when you come into initiation phase and when you're doing men's business. So when we went around to Uluru and they said that's for men, we're not going there for the women. So yeah, songs are about, in generally, yeah, you get sung it, and that's how you learn it.
So 10 years is a long journey. From your observation, what are the changes and growth of NITV in the past 10 years? And what does it mean for Australian Indigenous peoples?
This last decade, we'd won the massive awards for film, media, television journalism. We had to really prove ourselves that we could exist, not just for First Nations people, but for all Australians. So in this last 10 years, we had a lot to celebrate. And, we've grown media careers for our communities as well. And if you look at Australian television and media, it's very different to what it was 10 years ago. And I think NITV has played a special part of shifting the narrative. Now you've got a new generation of young Australians, but particularly our communities, seeing themselves on television in a way previous generations never got to see, or seeing themselves on digital platforms in a way, and empowered in that energy. And that's really shifting the narrative in Australia, but it's also shifting for justice and rights, and we have a voice in a way that we've never had. So we needed to really make a point. Uluru is at the heart of Australia, and so are we. So it was really important to have this incredible celebration. The environment was intense, and then rainbows came out for us. It was really special. We had to have our World Indigenous brothers and sisters there to also sing country, but to have the lawmen and women of that country also call us, welcome us, and make sure we were looked after. And just, their one advice is just keep positivity, the love, the energy. And that's what we do as a sector and a network. We keep creative and we use that energy. So the Uluru, we had a concert that went for 3 hours live across Australia. We celebrated with news programming. We reflected on the history. We thanked people for being a part of it, and we looked forward to an incredible future. And we shook up the dirt. We pulled country. We celebrated our cultures, and we really wanted to make sure we gave that gift to Australians who, and as I say, our communities who are our number one audience, and say thank you for being with us on this journey.